Hey everybody, happy Thursday. I hope you are having an awesome week. I am so excited to be hopping on here this afternoon to interview Nicole of SolFuel Wellness. We are hosting a workshop together next week on Thursday, the 5th at 7 p.m. at her space in Columbia City. So I'm just going to let the internet world let you know I'm here and wait for Nicole to hop on. But in the meantime, I saw that some of you guys had such a great time at We Yoga Co. Yoga at Gasworks Park last night. So loved seeing those pictures and hearing about how that was. So thank you, Annalise, for having some extra hang time afterwards. Hey, Nicole, I see you popping on. So let's see if we can get you all hooked up. Awesome. I haven't done one of these in a while, so it's always, you never know. You never know how it's going to work out. How it goes. It says connecting. So there we go.
Okay.
Hello.
I think I'm on. Hi.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. It's so good to see you.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'm going to just turn my volume up here real quick.
You're perfect.
Great.
How's your day going?
Good. Yeah, busy morning. Yes, but
Awesome.
it's been good. Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us and share with the community all about you and what you do.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Oh my gosh. Well, do you want to start out with a little introduction and share who you are, what you do?
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Nicole. I'm a physical therapist and I own and run my own physical therapy practice. I'm super fortunate that it's in the daylight basement of my house. So I have a very small commute and get to hang out with my 16-month-old son on my lunch break. So I feel pretty lucky for that. I've been a physical therapist for, 10 years now, and have been on my own for full-time for 2 years. For some reason, I thought it was a good idea to start my own business while I was still pregnant, but but it's been great. I get to spend an hour with each of my patients, which really gives me the time to sort of figure out what's going on. And I have a very hands-on approach. I'm a functional manual therapist. And so my approach is all about figuring out why something is going on and really treating the root underlying cause to get people back to kind of doing what they love to do. So
amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Do you want to speak a little bit more about like what a functional manual therapist is versus maybe like a more traditional physical therapist and what people can expect with that?
Totally. So in general, so everyone who goes to PT school graduates with the same level of knowledge and the same certification, regardless of if you decide to like work in a hospital or work with kids or work with, sports medicine, orthopedic injuries. And so then once you graduate, you sort of have the ability to then take a bunch of continuing education to kind of hone your skills in your field and figure out a little bit more about what you want to do. And so so what I am is a manual therapist, which really means that I use my hands as sort of the tool to help people get better. As opposed to sort of the flip side of that is someone who's more of an exercise-based therapist. And then under the umbrella of manual therapy, there's sort of 3 or 4 main kind of certifications that people go and do. And so I chose the functional manual therapy route because from my perspective, it's a much more holistic approach. It looks at sort of the whole, literally like every single tissue in the body. So like I treat muscles and soft tissues and fascia, but then I also treat joints. And then I get like really crazy and I treat like nerves and I treat the organs and literally like anything that is in your body is a part of my treatment approach, because I feel it's all part of our system. And so it's all very interconnected. And so that's, it was a 4-year process to get my functional manual therapy certification, but I can sort of confidently know that what I'm doing can help make people better. And then my exercises sort of supplement that versus sort of assuming that people can do exercises and that's going to make them better. So
amazing. And so what were you doing before you started your own personal practice? How was that transition for you, both personally and professionally?
Yeah, so I actually was like, I'm never going to own my own business. Like, I don't want to run a business. I just want to treat patients. And I worked at a clinic in Redmond, actually called PT Pro, which is a great, probably one of the better clinics in the area that sort of gives you an hour with your patients and sort of all of that sort of stuff. And but while I was there, my boss there was very much like, do whatever you want to do. If you want to bring in runners or you want to bring in rowers, like go ahead, go out and sort of like do the marketing, and like I will support you in whatever you want to do. And I kind of got to the point where I was like, I'm doing all of this, but like, why am I doing it for somebody else? And at the same time, like the clinic is in Redmond, and I was living in Seattle, and I would have, friends or sort of friends of friends that were like, I really would love to see you, but I don't want to go to the East Side. Like, would you see me? So literally I had a massage table, and I started going to people's houses and like treating them in their living rooms, like at the end of my work day.
Wow.
And that was sort of how I got started. And, fortunately I had a very supportive boss. And so as I prepared to sit for my exam for my functional manual therapy, I dropped down to part-time work. And then when I wrapped up that, I decided like, let me just see what I can do. So she allowed me to work part-time with her as I built my own business, which was an incredible gift. I don't think there are many bosses out there that would do that. And then I just got to the point where I was sort of maxing out the number of people that I could see. And I decided like, well, let me just take this leap of faith and see if I can do it on my own. And so it's been the best decision that I've ever made. It's been, from a like motherhood standpoint and a lifestyle standpoint, it's been incredible. Like my son never took a bottle. So like I breastfed him on my lunch breaks. Like I couldn't have done that and maybe he would have figured it out if I hadn't been there.
Right.
But, I didn't have that stress, and I've been sort of able to like, I started back at 10 hours a week, and, sort of over the last year have, progressively increased the number of patients I see and the time that I see. But it's been, it's really rewarding because I really can really treat people sort of how they need to be treated, and B, it sort of gives me the like lifestyle. I get to kind of, I don't know, I feel like I'm like the luckiest woman around. Like I have this really amazing, like professionally satisfying job.
Yeah.
And I get to like be with my son.
That's amazing.
Quite a bit too. So yeah, it's probably the best decision I've ever made from a professional standpoint. So
that's awesome. Yeah. How did like becoming, like when you got pregnant and when you became a mom, like how did that kind of play into these decisions you were making to make that transition? And what did that look like for you?
Yeah. So I sort of thought, actually like getting I sort of have known all along like that I like the flexibility of having this type of a job, but that like actually getting pregnant and like all that didn't really change the way that I decided to like open my own business and do that. It was a little crazy, like, okay, open my business. I was like, okay, in 6 months, I'm going to take 3 months off. Like, I hope this works out. And it did. Yeah. A lot of my patients came back when I came back from maternity leave, but, I think more just like my whole journey. Like I had a miscarriage. It took us a year to get pregnant a second time. Like, I think, and then sort of the whole pregnancy, the labor, the postpartum, like I think for me, like that has been very transformative in my work professionally. Like I thought that I knew a lot. Like, and I was super lucky. One of my really great friends who took this certification exam with me, she was pregnant at the same time as I was. And she and I have been treating each other sort of off and on for probably like 6 years. But we like, as I was going, after I had my miscarriage, she and I actually did a lot of visceral work together. So and this is some of the work that I do for my patients too, but she actually was like in my abdomen, like mobilizing my uterus, my fallopian tubes, my ovaries, like, really trying to make like my system as efficient as possible. And I do think that combined with acupuncture really helped me get pregnant. So like that already started to influence that. And that was work that I'd already been doing. But then she and I treated each other every other week until her son was born, which sadly was 3 months before mine was born. But, I really feel like that, we were super lucky to have that level of sort of care. But I think like I had a great pregnancy until like the very end, and then it all went out the window. But I think that treatment really made a big difference. And so that for me sort of started to say like, the fact that like, oh, you have back pain, like you're pregnant, it'll go away when your baby's born. Like I think you don't have to live with like back pain or like difficulty breathing or like, all these like really common complaints that women have while they're pregnant. It doesn't have to be that way. And unfortunately, like, there aren't a lot of practitioners that feel comfortable treating pregnant women. And so therefore there aren't very many OBs and midwives that know, like, oh, I should send you to PT. Like, even constipation during pregnancy can be a sign that your pelvic floor isn't doing what it needs to do.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, like, if you can't get the poop out, it might be hard to get the baby out. Like,
Yeah.
you know, so I think there's some of these things that we're like, well, that's just a part of pregnancy. And I think there's a lot that we can do to support that. So that sort of started to pique my interest in kind of treating, like, women while they're pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And then sort of over the last year, I've really dove into, like, all sorts of, like, pregnancy classes and women's health and pelvic floor and sort of, like, all these different things. And one of the things that I've really learned, and I wish that I knew this before I went into labor, was that, like, your pelvic floor is the stoplight for birth. Like,
Mm-hmm.
your baby's head hits your pelvic floor, and if your pelvic floor isn't going to relax because it's in a state of heightened tension, like, that baby is going to have a really hard time coming out. And those are all things that, like, I wish I had known. Like, I went to this class and this woman essentially was like, if this is what happens in your labor, it's because you have a tight pelvic floor. And I'm like, you literally just described my entire labor. I was at 5 centimeters dilated for, like, hours. And at, like, 20 hours, I got an epidural and everything relaxed and I had a baby. But, like, if I had known that, there are things that I could have done. And so now, like, it's been super rewarding for me to, like, work with women to, like, assess their pelvic floor, make sure that that's got good flexibility, to assess the mobility of the joints. Like, you know, we have this relaxin hormone, and just because it's there doesn't mean that, like, if you had an injury, like a tailbone injury, a back injury, a seatbelt injury, like, there's so many things. Like, we go into pregnancy with a body that has lived our entire life, and it doesn't just, like, magically open up for that baby to come out. And so I think, like, for me, my pregnancy journey has really made me realize, like, what a disservice we are doing to pregnant women, because there's so much we can do to help. And I think part of it is just educating women on, like, here are all the things, you know, and this is really what like a lot of the class that we're going to do next week is covering, is, like, here are the parts of your body that, like, this is what needs to happen to your body. Like, let's stop talking about, like, what the baby does. Like, the baby's pattern is a reflex. Like, they don't know anything different, but it's your body that can help facilitate a smoother birth. And I think there's so much that we can do to support women in doing that. And it doesn't take, you know, it sort of depends on you. Like, it doesn't take necessarily a ton of treatment, but it takes, like, very sort of specific and skilled treatment to address these issues to help facilitate a smoother birth. And so, like, that really got me into this. And then, you know, I've experienced some kind of, you know, some prolapse symptoms, some sort of postpartum complications. Like, I'm a big runner. Like, it took me ages to get back into running. And I think that there's, like, I feel like, gosh, I feel like I knew a lot. And then I went through this, and it's like, oh my God, there's so much that I didn't know. Yeah. And I've learned so much, but it's like, how do I share this information with other women? Because if I don't know it, like, there's no way that people who aren't used to working with the human body know it. And so I just think there's so much we can do. I'm so excited that we have a midwife from Swedish coming to the class next week. And I just am feeling like, okay, we can, you know, we can start to change at least care in Seattle. And, you know, like, I'm super pumped that she just wants to come and, like, learn, like, what are we doing and what can she do to help sort of support that. So I'm hopeful, especially here in Seattle. But
absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely so much of, like, what I've seen through starting Oh Mama and running these workshops is that this is just stuff that we're not talking about, and we as women know our own bodies as well as we should, and there's just so much power in that education and in that knowledge that I want to share with everybody too. So thank you so much for partnering with us for this workshop.
So
amazing.
That was sort of a long answer to your like question, but
I love it. But how has, like, you mentioned you're a runner. Like, how has fitness kind of changed for you before pregnancy, during, and after? Like, how has that kind of been impacted for you?
Yeah, so I think like especially during pregnancy, this is one of the other one of my other sort of soapboxes, I guess, is that they tell you this like right now the recommendation is just like do what you've always done. And it's like, okay, that's awesome, like almost never in your pregnancy. Like your first trimester you feel terrible and you're like, I don't really want to do what I've done. And then in sort of second trimester it's like your body starts changing. What does that mean? Like as an athlete, you're used to like pushing through discomfort, right? Like, yeah, I'm out for a 6-mile run and like, oh, even like, oh, my knee's a little tweaky or like, this is hard, but it's like you just sort of push through that. And I think for me, I really had to do a lot of like soul searching a little bit to be like, okay, I'm actually not, it doesn't benefit me to like push through this discomfort. And I was, I ran till I was probably about 5 months pregnant, and I probably could have stopped a little bit earlier, but it's just sort of, so I feel like that's a big challenge, is knowing like, what does that actually mean to like do what you've always done? And like, what are the signs that like you should be looking for to know that like, okay, this is maybe a good time to hit pause, I was sort of like getting a lot of like pelvic pressure, and it's like, did that contribute to something? Like, I don't know, but like that was probably a sign that like it was time to change it up. And so I did a lot of, for a handful of years, one of the sort of the other like pillars of my home exercise program is just a lot of body weight strength training. And so I sort of have a routine that I've been doing for a while, and I was able to continue that but modify it kind of as I went through my pregnancy. And one of the other keys that I think sort of through pregnancy, but especially in that postpartum period, is I had this sort of 10-minute, like I call it my warm-up routine, that I try and do every day. And then if I have time to do more, I do more. And if I don't, then at least I've done this sort of 10-minute movement routine. And I think that for me has been like so key. And it was a routine that like I could do in like half asleep, which I did after my son was born. And so I think like that's sort of part of what the other component that we'll cover in our class next Thursday is this sort of 10-minute movement routine. And like, yes, it's targeted and sort of the exercises are a little specific for pregnancy, but I mean, my husband does the same routine that I do. So like it's helpful for really anybody. And so that's part of where like anyone who is, even if you're postpartum and you're like, I just kind of want to figure out a way to move, like you would learn something in this seminar as well. And so I think for me, especially after my son was born, was this 10-minute routine that like, I remember he was probably like a week old, that I like took my yoga mat outside because I like hadn't been outside, and just like went through this routine. And I couldn't even do, like I was having all this nerve pain, like I couldn't even raise my arm up overhead, but I was like, I'm just gonna move. And so for me, like really early on, I got back into this like 10-minute, and at this point I don't remember if I did it every day or if I did it every few days, but it just like gave me something to get back to. And that I think has really helped me sort of start that routine back up and start that habit back up. And so same thing, like this program, this 10-minute little routine that everybody will get in the class, like it's great to, you could do it until the day you give labor, and you could start it again the day after, like, and so I think that it's a little bit of movement every day goes a really long way. And, essentially what we're looking at is like mobility of the spine, mobility of the hips, some pelvic floor strength, and just a little bit of like all over, just like move everything, move your arms, move your back, move your hips, move your legs, move your feet, and just get everything moving. And I think that that's really key. Like it doesn't have to be this big long program. And then if you do more, like that's awesome, but at least you've moved for like 10 minutes. Yeah. Again, like I think walking is awesome, but it's just one direction, right? Moving everything in one plane. And I think that it's really important to move in these different planes. So that kind of
gives you like a little bit of a benchmark for seeing like how your body's actually feeling and recovering and doing. Because otherwise you might not like maybe even realize like where things are really hurting, or that there might be some issue somewhere in your body.
Yes, yeah, it's a great sort of like, oh, where am I today? Or what, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and then, oh, I couldn't do this last week. And, you know, and it's so hard after you know, especially if you're an active person, like you're used to being athletic, especially for a first pregnancy. I think people can be pretty successful at exercising throughout their pregnancy. But then you have this baby and like I mean, literally everything in your life changes. And then it's so hard to not be like, well, I used to be able to do this. And this, like,
Right.
I want to get back to doing what I used to do. And it's like, that's awesome and that's great. But this, in some ways, we have to stop comparing ourselves to where we were before. I mean, I think right now, I would say it took me a year to get back
Yeah.
to feeling like, okay, like I can go to the climbing gym and okay, I can actually climb stuff that I was climbing actually 2 years ago, you know, because
Right.
before I got pregnant, or like, okay, now I can run and things feel pretty good. But in reality, it's like if someone tears their ACL and has knee surgery, I tell people it's going to take you a year, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and so I think there's this like, well, why do we expect pregnancy and labor and delivery, and if you've had a C-section, like why do we expect that like women are just going to be like 6 weeks back to what they were doing? We
Yeah.
don't expect that for any other injury in the human body. And so like, and part of it's just that like that's how long it takes for tissues to heal. We
Yeah.
can't, some of that, you know, really for your muscles and ligaments to heal, it takes 12 to 16 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like period. Like we can't really change that. And
Yeah.
so this like expectation that like at 6 weeks you can like have all the sex that you want, it's gonna be great, and you go back to all this exercising, and like your skin has healed in that time frame, but
Mm-hmm.
your muscles and your joints and your other tissues need another 6 to 10 weeks after that. And
Yeah.
you know, I think really like you should go to your 6 week appointment. They should be like, here's a prescription for a pelvic floor physical therapist.
Right.
They're going to guide you through this process.
Yeah. Totally. There's
And
so much to learn that is not common.
yeah.
I think it's important to keep talking about it. But I know, I think this 10-minute exercise you're talking about is also part of your Soul Mamas program.
Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit about like what you're working on with that and like what's that all about?
Yeah. So essentially, like my physical therapy practice and really is SolFuel. And the whole reason I actually started
here.
This second business was because my lawyer was like, if you're going to be sort of hosting fitness-based classes, you should have them separate from your like medical license. And I was like, okay, cool. I get to form a new logo. But really, so I mean, Soul Mamas is about really supporting women during their pregnancy and after. Like, and it's designed to sort of be, and it's sort of in a little bit of a transition right now. But I think actually this workshop that we're hosting is going to kind of become the sort of the main part of Soul Mamas, of this idea of like, here's a workshop that you can come to learn about like, how do you get ready to have a baby? You know, and then there'll be a second class that's a little bit more about like, how do you actually push? Like I went into labor and was like, I have no idea how to push.
Yeah.
Like, I'm supposed to know this, but like, I have no idea. And it's like, that's stupid. Like, you know, like, maybe I should have known, but maybe someone could have helped teach me. And it's more than just breathing, you know? And so like the second class, and I'm going to sort of launch this all, I think, the second class, start of next year, is going to be about like, how do you push? And like, what are good positions to be in? And because there are things that we know, like to go in, I'm going to time out.
I love it.
Like, okay, so to go in, like when you first go into labor, the baby's head drops in the top of the pelvis. So essentially you need the top of the pelvis to be open. So there are different positions that sort of open the pelvis here. But then for the baby to come out, the top has to close, right? And the bottom has to open. And so there are like there's even different types of squatting or different things that you can do to help the baby engage in your pelvis and then help the baby come out the bottom of your pelvis. And so the second class is going to sort of be about, you know, like, how does one push? What does that actually feel like? And then what are different things that you can do to help troubleshoot your labor? I think in this area, we're so lucky that there's so many doulas and it's like such a common thing, but they learn a lot of those same techniques with from a slightly different lens. But there's so much that we can do that helps facilitate labor. And there's even like this woman that I took this class from, she's like, if someone's sacrum is stuck, let's say like this, that's closing the opening. And so, she's like, I've drawn X's on people's backs and been like, have your husband push right here, because that's what helps open that. And so the second, this is all stuff I do, on a one-on-one basis. Like I've had people bring their partners in, but the second class is sort of designed to kind of be like, let's talk about labor and how can you facilitate your labor. And then the third class will be sort of a postpartum recovery pelvic floor. I'm actually doing a workshop at a yoga studio down in Auburn in November. That's also going to be, that's sort of more about pelvic floor and kind of postpartum recovery stuff. But that's sort of Soul Mama's goal, is to really target more people and sort of spread more knowledge. Like my business is a cash-based practice, so I'm not in network with insurance, which can be a financial barrier for people. And I don't want women to feel like they can't gain this knowledge because they can't afford a one-on-one treatment session. Yeah. So part of it is just like, how do I reach more people? I really don't want to do online classes. Like, I think that the in-person, the hands-on, like, there's so much value that comes out of doing things in person. And so I'm pretty resistant to putting stuff online right now, like the classes online, but my goal is to really sort of be here for the Seattle community and, both as like a physical therapist, but then how can I take everything that I know and I've learned and share it with more people? So that's kind of what Soul Mamas is all about, is just like spreading the knowledge. And I have lots of ambitions of like writing blogs and like doing all this stuff, but
you also have a 16-month-old.
There's only so many hours in the day.
And it seems like you've been enjoying the summer a bit too, as well. Yes. What do you like to do on your free time? Yeah,
so we've put our Bob stroller to the test, and actually taken it out trail running a handful of times.
Awesome.
We've done a lot of camping, and then I actually just got back from my first trip without baby and without husband. I actually went river rafting for 5 days in Colorado. So,
oh my gosh, amazing.
It was incredible. I was no cell phone service, no internet. I was completely out there, which I think was both like hard, but also I had to just be where I was. Like, I think I missed my son the most when I got back to cell phone service and I got all these pictures of him.
Yeah.
That's like the saddest I was the whole time that I was on, because I rode a bunch of class 4 rapids, and so that was fun. Yeah, I just outside as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's been a great summer. So,
oh my gosh, that's awesome. Well, I wanted to see, I know we have keeping in mind of your time, but I wanted to make sure we touched on all the things. Is there anything else that people should be, like, who would you say the workshop is for next week? Like, what else do you want to say about, like, what we can expect at the workshop?
Yeah, so I think you can the workshop, I would say, certainly if you're pregnant, like, come. Even if you're having a baby, like, next week. Like, there's stuff that you will learn no matter where you are in your pregnancy. If you're brand new pregnant and you don't want anyone else to know, we won't tell them that you're there, but you should come. I think really, if you're pregnant, and even if you're thinking about getting pregnant, like this, in some ways, I think my 4th Soul Mamas class that I would love to do would be like a preconception class. Yeah. So many people in Seattle, like, we know you should eat well. And, my doctor was like, be the best version of yourself for the 3 months before you get pregnant. I was like, okay, I'll do my best. But I think, like, so much of this you can identify before you get pregnant. And then certainly from like a more in-depth physical therapy practice, there's, more that we can do if we can have you laying on your stomach and like doing different things that we can't do during pregnancy. So I really think, if you're hoping to get pregnant, in the next year, like, come. You will gain I'll have a handout for everybody at the end too, so you can even take it and file it away. Or if you're newly postpartum, or even a year, 2 years, and you're looking for a way to like get back into a movement routine, like the class is for you too. We will definitely talk about things directly related to like pregnancy and childbirth that won't be directly applicable to you, but the movement routine that you're going to get will definitely be helpful. So, and certainly if you're someone that isn't any of those things, but you work with pregnant women, like, come. I mean, really, I guess like if you were a guy, it'd be kind of boring, but you could do exercises too.
Although it is still interesting. I swear, it amazes me too that like I know so little about my body, and then like my husband knows nothing. So like trying to explain things to him has been really interesting too. So
yeah, so I would say it's most applicable for like probably preconception and pregnant women, but I think it's open to really anybody, because really like once you're postpartum, like you're postpartum forever, and so I think, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about anatomy. We're going to kind of talk about like all these muscles and all these bones and everything that sort of goes on in your body. We're going to talk about like what happens during labor. And then we're going to sort of talk about like the areas of your body that need to move and open, and, and all of that. So you're going to learn a lot about like your own body, what needs to happen, and sort of even and where you're at today, which is kind of the first step. And then you'll leave with sort of a 10-minute routine of a movement program that you can do, in the ideal world every day, but as much as it sort of fits in to your schedule. So
amazing. Wonderful. Great.
Expect.
I did want to remember to ask you about why you named SolFuel Wellness.
Yeah,
what it is.
Sort of a funny story, actually. Like when probably almost 10 years ago now, I was like super into making ice cream and like food for people.
Love it.
And so for my birthday, my godparents gave me a branding session with a graphic designer. And so actually I was on a river trip again, the same river, and was just sort of like brainstorming different ideas. And so that's actually where the sort of SolFuel we came up with. Like I like the idea of like the rising sun and fuel being more the food at the time. And then, but it was just for fun. Like I never sold anything. Like it was more like I got stickers and I like put it on the ice cream that I made for people. And then when I decided to start my own business, I was like, well, I need a name. And I just sort of like, the outdoors are really important to me. And so this idea, sol is sun in Spanish, and sort of this idea of kind of, the sun, nature, I also, sort of sunlight kind of lightens things, and just sort of that idea of kind of bringing light to dark spaces. And then, the fuel side of things is just really about getting people back to doing what they love. And it just sort of, I don't know, I really liked the name, and I thought like, well, I think I can turn this into a physical therapy business instead. And so that's sort of how the name came about. And then Soul Mamas was really just like, actually my mom came up with that, and she was like, well, we wanted it to be related but different. And I was like, oh, perfect. So
that's awesome.
Totally random, not the way one would normally name like a physical therapy business, but I liked it. It was even the same logo. Like
I love that.
Adapted it a little bit. And it seems to fit. So
that's so funny. I also am obsessed with making ice cream myself, and it was my godparents that got me into it too.
Oh, that's
so we have that weird connection.
That's amazing. Yes.
So funny. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, Nicole, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. It was so great to like hear more about you and your perspective on all this stuff. And I'm so pumped for our workshop next week, and just to continue to share you and your expertise with Oh Mama and the Seattle community in general.
Yes, I'm just responding to this person that just asked when and where is the workshop. Yeah. So it's at my office in Columbia City, at the SolFuel office. I'm right near Third Place Books, and if you go onto the link, the actual address is there for you, and it's next Thursday. What is that? The 7th?
The 5th, I think.
The 5th. Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
the details. The details are in the link in profile.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's free for all mama members, and perfect, thank you. $15 drop in, and you can register again via that link in the profile, and we would love to have you.
Yes, yeah, thank you. This was so great.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And Nicole, I'll let you know if I get any more questions from people tuning in later. If you guys do have any questions, feel free to DM me and I'll get them over to Nicole to answer them for you. So thank you, Nicole.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, you too.
Bye. Bye.